Recently, I was made aware of the Taylor Sheridan show Yellowstone having its series finale. And apparently, in the series finale, the white ranchers, the Dutton family, gave their quote unquote stolen land back to the Indians. And to me, it just further confirms why I never even bothered watching that show, even though they try to sell it as a quote unquote conservative show. And not even much the creators themselves, but a lot of people of the peanut gallery that is so still desperately clinging to Hollywood for some type of validation. And before I go more into that, what's also funny, this show is supposed to be representing natives, but in reality, when you look up the election results, Native Americans voted 68% for Trump. They voted for Trump more than white people voted for Trump overall. They almost voted for Trump the same level that black people vote Democrat. And the reason why that's relevant is because if you listen to Hollywood and their stories, you would think, Native Americans are a bunch of libtards, always harping on victimhood ideology. But in reality, they're far more conservative than a lot of so called white people, based on the election results. And so that's what makes this whole narrative comical and just another example of Hollywood's blatant dishonesty. Because in reality, based on how the natives voted, the American Indians voted this election, in reality, they are against the environmentalists. They aren't against the white people, the ranchers that run the land. They have no interest in that. Their reservations, their gun rights, which we know liberals hate. Again, anti the environmentalists that try to dictate to people what they should and shouldn't be able to do. And also, I remember looking up a story about how much the open borders negatively affects the reservations because a lot of the cartels push their drugs and violence over into these reservations that rarely gets talked about and never gets talked about in the form of a story on a television show or a movie. But they've been doing a lot of native representation. And again, whenever you get representation from Hollywood, they're going to make you homosexual and matriarchal, feminist led. And that's why no one in their right mind should desire having representation when it comes to Hollywood, which is why in my previous channel that's been deleted, I made a number of videos forewarning people, uh, particularly when it came to the uptick of native representation in Hollywood, forewarning them that they would just represent you in a negative light, in a dishonest light. And that's what this Yellowstone series finale represented. Of course it gives them another opportunity to wag the finger at so-called white people, but it also provided them with another opportunity to dishonestly portray how actual living American Indians think and behave. And I saw someone uh, who talked about having their family born and raised in Montana, and he basically stated what I observed is that first of all, they don't go around wearing cowboy hats. Number one, the white ranchers, and number two, the American Indians, believe it or not, are far more conservative than the liberals would like to portray. But of course, when it comes to libtards, they want to portray every so called minority group as libtarded morons like them because they want them solely focused on victimhood complex and narratives that co-sign the globalist Marxist agenda that they're pushing through the mainstream media and their, socio-political ideology. But again, when I heard about this series finale, I wasn't surprised. And, maybe, just maybe, that's part of the reason why Kevin Costner felt like, oh, well, it's okay if I leave this. Because even though he's a libtard himself, supported Liz Cheney, the so called Republican, he probably still didn't want to, pretty much emasculate his character. And so he would rather have his character, you know, essentially die in his absence by not being a part of the show than to be seen as a weakling handing over land. And again, it's a narrative that they love to portray on screen, but they'll never actually apply to their own individual lives. None of these woke white libtards will give up their ranches that they own, their mansions, townhouses in the city, penthouse suites. They'll never give it up to Indians, to blacks for reparations. And again, that's what makes this just so demented and dishonest. But they'll sure offer up other people's land, just not theirs. Kind of like how, they treated the illegals when they showed up at their Martha's vineyard. Quickly got them off the premises. But again, it makes me very happy that I never really got into the show. I did watch like years ago the first episode, like when the show debuted, because it was like a two part. It was a two-parter premiere, and I did like it. But thank goodness, I'm guessing just on instinct, I never watched another episode. You know, and again, that was before I decided to, you know, purposely, permanently boycott supporting anything coming out of Hollywood. I mean, because again, the reality is, no one that gets highly rewarded in Hollywood is going to actually be allowed to be conservative and create narratives that adhere to conservative ideology. And so, this finale was inevitable. And I'm sure a similar thing will end up happening on Stallone's show whenever they do the finale for that. But yeah, no surprise. Pushing more victimhood narrative and anti white racism propaganda. Which is why anybody in their right mind that claims not to support this narrative should be permanently boycotting Hollywood.